Hello and welcome to Syriac Origins. In this video we'll be looking at Michael the Syrian, referred to in Syriac as Michael. This translates into English as Michael the Great. For simplicity's sake, I'll just call him Michael for the remainder of the video. Michael was the patriarch of the Syriac Orthodox Church of Antioch in the 12th century AD. He is most famous for putting together a chronicle of history in the Syriac language. This is an extremely important document in Syriac literature and is considered to possibly be the largest chronicles written during the medieval period. Some modern-day Assyrian apologists have identified a couple of lines in this book that they claim demonstrate that Michael considered the ancient Assyrians to be the forefathers of today's Syriacs or Syrioi, even resorting to taunting young members of the Syriac Orthodox Church on social media because of this claim. So as usual, I like to delve into these things a lot deeper and we'll see what the basis for these claims actually is. However, in this particular instance, it's not just the one line that has been cherry-picked to further a false historical view, there is a couple. So I'll break these down into separate videos as I like to keep these videos quite short. So in this video, we'll look at the most prominent one and we'll get back to the others later in a future video. Now, obviously, I don't have Michael's original manuscript, but what I do have is the Cabot facsimile published in 1890, which according to the Syriac Encyclopedic Dictionary is a pretty good copy of the Edessa manuscript. It only contains minimal mistakes, so for the purposes of this video, it's more than adequate. And where I could, I also checked the Cabot against images that I have of the Edessa manuscript. So let's get started. These questions of heritage arise from page 17, where Michael draws a family tree of the biblical character Noah. Below the family tree, the focus quickly moves to the sons of Shem. The names of the people that have literature from the sons of Shem: the Chaldeans, Assyrians that are Syrians, Hebrews, Persians, Medes, Arabs. The claim here is that this demonstrates that, at least according to Michael the Syrian, that the Syrians, Syrioi, are from the Assyrians. The first point to notice here is that he omits the Arameans from the list, despite the fact that he identifies the Arameans correctly as the descendants of Shem in the family tree that he drew on the very same page. Further to this, Michael continues, in the very next sentence, to list the people that don't have literature, and again fails to mention the Arameans. This is important, we'll come back to this later. Now, as usual, let's look at the other quotes from the text to see if this quote is actually in context with the remainder of the book. So, we'll start with page 7. Here, Michael writes again about the descendants of Shem. The Assyrians, the Luwians, the Arameans, that are Syrians, Hebrews, Persians, and it continues. So here, Michael refers to the Syrians, or Syriacs, or Syrioi as having Aramean ancestry. This begs the question, how did our modern day Assyrian friends get to page 17 before they managed to read page 7? Page 7 clearly disagrees with their views. Of course, we should not be content with just having conflicting quotes. Let's look into the other elements of the book that describe these things in more detail. So we'll move along to page 748, where we see the start of Appendix 2. And the actual title for Appendix 2 reads like this: With God's help, in remembrance of empires that were made in ancient times through our race, Arameans, that is to say, the descendants of Aram, who were called Syrians or Syrian people, we have raised with care or written authorized the evidence that relates to their empires. There are a few important things to note here. Firstly, he refers to our race, the race of Aram, the race of the Arameans. He describes himself as belonging to the Arameans. He demonstrates pride in his Aramean heritage. Secondly, he claims the Syrians are descendants of the Arameans very clearly. Notice it's just the Arameans. Only they are identified as the ancestors of the Syrioi. There is no mention of the Assyrians at all. Thirdly, he talks about the evidence that he and other Syriac fathers have preserved. In other words, he's leaving a legacy of Aramean ancestry, of remembrance of past empires and glories that he and others are maintaining for future generations of Syriacs and future generations of Arameans. The remainder of the book is littered with other references to the Aramean origins of the Syriacs. There's not enough time to mention all of these, and like I mentioned before, We'll deal with these in a future video. So how does the quote on page 17 that says the Assyrians that are Syrians fit into all of this? Well, there are two possible explanations. One is how the term Orthoroyal was used. Secondly, is the issue of how the scribe copied the manuscript. So let's start by looking at how the term Orthoroyal was used in Syriac literature. In Syriac, Orthoroyal is a gentilic form of the word Ashuroyal. In English, both these words translate into Assyrian. In Syriac, it is much more subtle than this. The term Orthoroye in Syriac literature was used to refer to the Persians, people from Greater Persian region, or sometimes more specifically the people from the city of Mosul, keeping in mind that this is during the Christian period. Further to this, some Syriac fathers would also use the term to denote enemies. Orthoroye was used as a derogatory term to describe the enemies of the Syriacs or the enemies of Christianity, especially along the Persian border. The use of the term Orthoroye took on the meaning of Assyrian nationalists only in the 20th century AD, so in its current definition, it's a relatively new term. And that's what he means when he wrote Assyrians that are Syrians, according to some people. The Assyrians are a subset of the Syriacs, not the ancestors of the Syriacs, the subset being people from Persia or people from Mosul. In order for this explanation to be valid, we need to find out if Michael himself was familiar with this usage of the term Orthoroye. We see from page 630 that Michael calls Imad ad-Din Zengi an Assyrian pig, or Haziro Orthoroyo in Syriac. Notice he uses the term Orthoroyo, not Ashuroyo. So was Zengi an Assyrian for Michael to call him an Assyrian? No, far from it. Zengi was a Muslim. He was a Mongol from Azerbaijan, or Persia, if you like. He was clearly not an Assyrian, and yet Michael called him an Assyrian pig. Before anyone chimes in with Michael may have mistakenly thought Zengi was an Assyrian, well, Michael knew Zengi's background. Zengi destroyed Edessa, a city which Michael loved, which is why Michael wrote about him in the first place. He describes Zengi's background in detail. He repeatedly calls him a Turk. He also labels him the governor of Mosul, which is true. Zengi was the governor of Mosul for at least 2 years. Michael also knew that Zengi was a Muslim. There is nothing Assyrian about Zengi, and Michael still calls him an Assyrian pig. That's because the term Orthoroyo referred to people from Mosul in modern-day Iraq. And at the time, that was part of Greater Persia. So based on this, some people conclude that the quote on page 17 that says Assyrians that are Syrians, or Orthoroye Tenun Sirioye, Michael is actually referring to the literary excellence that came out of the region of Mosul from people such as Isaac of Nineveh. So it has nothing to do with the ethnic term Assyrian, which is a fair enough conclusion, but unfortunately this raises other questions. For example, why would he only refer to the Syriacs from Mosul? Remember, on page 17, he not only lists the people that have literature, but he lists the people that don't have literature. He does not list the Arameans in either list. He makes no mention or recognition of any Aramean literature, which is really quite ridiculous, despite identifying their prominence in the family tree that he drew on the very same page. We've also seen on page 748 his pride in his Aramean ancestry and belonging to the Aramean race. Why would he neglect to mention the Arameans in the context of literary achievement, or even the lack of literary achievement? The reality is we are not reading Michael's own handwriting. And this brings us to the second explanation, which is the scribe, or more to the point, the error of the scribe. The oldest version of Michael's chronicles that we have is the Edessa manuscript, and that dates back to the year 1598 AD. Michael wrote his chronicles in the year 1195 AD. This is obviously written in the days before computer imaging or the printing press, so large volumes of works were copied by hand, by individual monks or teams of monks. And this led to mistakes. These mistakes were actually quite common. It's possible that the Arameans were simply left out of the sentence by a distracted scribe that started copying the text from the wrong location, in the year 1598 AD version or an even earlier version. Otherwise, the word Aramean would have made an appearance among the people that have literature, appearing as the names of the people that have literature from the sons of Shem, the Chaldeans, Assyrians, Arameans that are the Syrians, Hebrews, Persians, Medes, Arabs. This is just a possibility. The reality is we may never find out the truth. This, coupled with the fact that the book is littered throughout the Chronicles with constant references to the Syriacs or Sidonians being Arameans, we get a very different picture of what is stated on page 17 and what our modern day Assyrian friends would have you believe. So in short, what we have encountered here is another cherry-picked quote. Like I said earlier, I will deal with the remainder of Michael's Chronicles in a future video. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.